On January 31st, 2017, I gave a presentation at the Extremists Club in London. The title was Fake News, Old Beer in New Bottles. I did this at 24 hours notice. It was made from notes. I met Alison Shublow there, another victim of malicious persecution, and in her case malicious prosecution. Because of the late, the short notice, I say it was just notes. I wasn't able to do. I like to put a lot of do a lot of background research on my presentations. This was cobbled together from stuff I've done over the years. It wasn't quite what David Parry was expecting, but he wasn't unhappy with it. Something with which I'm a little unhappy is that, due to no fault of mine, the speech wasn't detailed, but the recording of it was. Hopefully this is the last time something like that will happen to me. So the last few minutes of it weren't recorded, but basically what I was saying is that organisations like Reprieve and other campaigning organisations, they simply lie. It isn't only the government, it isn't only big powerful organisations and lobbies that lie to us. It's charities, groups opposing or ostensibly opposing human rights abuses, groups pushing racial agendas, of course, fighting the chimeras of sexism, patriarchy, yada yada yada. So my apologies for this being curtailed. I thought long and hard before putting it online. It's been over 2 years, 2.5 years. But anyway, this is Old Beer in New Bottles, complete as far as possible, and I hope you like it.
So I emailed my stalwarts, Dr. Nicholas Kellestrom, of course, and Alexander Barron. Alexander instantly struck me with all this fake news malarkey. So I thought, well, that sounds like a bit of a bum fight. That is incredible fun, let's do that. Alexander is an author. He is a researcher. He has done some journalism in his day. He's actively, literally upset people in Parliament. So yeah! So it's not Jez is uncontrollable, isn't it? So it's not just talk. He actually has done that, trying to get people hauled out the chamber and that sort of stuff. But he's going to talk about, what was it, new beer in old bottles and the great fake news conspiracy. Raise your hands for Alexander!
I've got a few notes actually. I call this fake news, old beer in new bottles. Everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Fake news has been much in the news of late. Nobody understands. Everybody understand what it is? Yeah. Well, it's actually been around for quite a long time.
Actually, would you explain it? Just
Yes.
on the side
Yes.
Listen to the BBC.
Oh, that's so hard.
Well, as I'm sure some of you know, the centre was actually a post in the Roman Empire, and we were at one time dependent on the state for everything we heard. Today we have YouTube has over 1 billion subscribers, and obviously with heavy overlap, I think it's about 1.65 billion on Facebook, and close to 1 billion on Twitter. So that is marvellous, but of course it also means you've got all the idiots out there, people who don't understand how to use it to interpret evidence, and you've got malicious people as well, malicious organisations. I want to talk about, take a slightly different approach here, rather than governments and perfidious political organisations. I want to talk about organisations that profess to be campaigning for, well, specifically campaigns against miscarriage of justice and injustices. I mean, I'm sure we're all opposed to miscarriage of justice and people being treated badly. Anyone here was here when I made my speech on victim narratives?
Yes.
So you're like, well, it's similar ground. Well, let's start with two quotes. I've got one here. Lies and deceptions in the good cause are all too common. Anybody heard that before? Something similar?
Mm.
That was the great Thomas Sowell in his 1984 book, Civil Rights, Rhetorical Reality. And this is a quote from Superman, Christopher Reeve. You can claim all sorts of things if no one bothers to question you. He was actually talking about Donald Trump at the time, so I hope that's not what I meant. That gets to the nub of it. There's people saying all sorts of things, and for whatever reason, nobody's questioning them. All these organisations churning out their propaganda, nobody's questioning them. Right, I'd like to start with anyone familiar with the case of Sacco and Vanzetti?
Sacco who?
Sacco and Vanzetti. No? Sacco and Vanzetti were two Italian anarchists. And in 1920, they murdered two men during the course of a robbery. And because they were anarchists, fellow travellers of the comrades, it was a big campaign. This is in Massachusetts. It was a big campaign to portray them as innocents. It lasted 7 years until they were finally executed. If you actually study the documentation, as I did years ago, the worthwhile documentation, it's clear they were guilty as hell. But that didn't stop people campaigning for them. Another case which had a lot of media coverage, which was not political but was made political, was the A6 murder. Anyone? There's one or two people here may remember the A6 murder.
BBC reporter or something? BBC journalist?
Hanratty,
yeah. I can just about remember. I was 5 years old at the time, but I remember more the campaign afterwards. James Hanratty was a nasty individual. He was he'd been divorced, or as it was then, all sorts of things, and he was a wannabe gangster. And one August evening, he appeared out of nowhere. There was a couple sitting in a car in the home counties off the road. There was a government scientist called Michael Gregston, who was a married man, and his mistress Valerie Story, and they were sitting in the car canoodling. And Hanratty walks up with a gun and told Gregston to drive, and drove around for hours. And then he decided he wants to have a kip, as he said. So he directs him to a field. He shot Gregston in the head and blamed the victim, said he moved too fast, although later he denied actually being there. So he got the body out of the car. Then he put Valerie's Story into the back of the car and raped her. Then he took some money off her, and then he said he was walking off to disappear. And he turned around and emptied his gun into her and left her for dead. Showing incredible presence, she played dead. It probably wasn't too hard, she really was dead. She was found the following morning, and she identified him. And Hanratty went to trial, and the police did a stellar investigation, because they had all sorts of red herrings. And he was brought to book and he was hanged at Bedford. And before that, but really afterwards, there was a campaign that I hanged the wrong man. The grounds for this was the first man arrested was a guy named Peter Alphon, who was a bit of a weirdo, and a renegade failed lawyer with the unfortunate name of John Justice decided to put Alphon up to confessing, and John Lennon financed a film about the case. The Hanratty family weren't too happy about their couldn't believe their loved one did something so terrible. And most of all was a man named Paul Foote, Everybody heard of Paul Foot? He wrote a book on the case claiming Hanratty was innocent. On the face of it, it was a miscarriage of justice thing, but really his narrative was the wicked capitalist state murdered this innocent man, this working class man. Of course, when the anti-racism movement got going, they weren't so keen on working class white men then. But for years and years they had this propaganda. At the time of the 86 murder, most people hadn't heard of DNA, not outside scientific science. But by the 1990s, with enhanced DNA techniques, they found that the original exhibits from the Hanratty trial were extant. So they decided to go to. They thought there would be a substantial possibility of the conviction being reversed. They went to the Hanratty family, and Michael Hanratty, the Hanratty brother, said it was like winning the lottery. So they did the tests, and eventually they exhumed Hanratty, and there was a posthumous appeal, and the exhibits of the man who raped Valerie's story was the man in a coffin. And they refused to accept this. Paul Foot refused point blank to accept it. And the Hanratty family were represented by one of the most corrupt law firms in England, Binders, and we had this total refusal to accept the facts. The case of Sapphire Ram, I've discussed that in elsewhere, but I'm going to be doing some more work on that fairly soon. Ram murdered a man in a restaurant in November 1986, and the papers concerning the trial of recently been, well, earlier last year were released, so sometime we're going to be taking a visit to Q to update the website. Another case I'd like to mention is that of Linda Carty. Anybody heard of an organisation called Reprieve?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a so-called charity opposes the death penalty in the anybody heard of Linda Anita Carty? No? Linda Carty is on death row in Texas. She was sentenced to death in 2002 for a murder which was quite bizarre. Would have been even more bizarre if she'd gone away. She has a very tenuous connection to Britain. She's technically a British citizen. I don't know if she's ever been here. She had this. She wanted to. She was living with a guy, and she wanted to get pregnant. She couldn't get pregnant, so she decided to take this other woman's baby. She could actually cut her open and take the baby out. Fetal abduction, which is off the planet, you know. It probably surprised you to learn that there've been quite a few cases like that. But I won't surprise anybody to learn they've all been in America. But by the time she got round to persuading a gang of marks to carry out the abduction, the baby had been born. So she recruited this gang. She told them the house where the victim was living, that her husband, or a common law husband, was a drug dealer. There was lots of drugs there, lots of money. They went in, did the robbery. They found a bit of cash, but nothing much, and they took the baby and the mother. And Linda Carty smothered Joanna Rodriguez with a plastic bag in the back of the car. What happened was, obviously a crime like that, and small-time punks don't want to get away for long. They were quickly rounded up, and the district attorney, or district attorney's office, made a decision that she was the principal. Without her, nothing would have happened. So they said to the others, right, you justify against Linda Carty, and you won't be in the frame for the death penalty, because I'm sure you know Texas is the execution capital of the world. And Carty didn't testify at a trial, which will strictly incriminate evidence against that. And she was sentenced to death, and she looked around, or Reprieve looked around, and they found her. And they decided to mount a campaign to free this innocent woman on death row. And she's had several appeals which have failed. In 2009, they mounted a campaign here, actually in London. If you recall, there's a spare, I don't know if it's still empty, at Plinth in Trafalgar Square. Remember the artist Anthony Gormley had this idea that people could stand on it for an hour and recite poetry or do whatever they want. Well, they pitched in. There was, I think, 1,000 people here in a month. And they had a cardboard cutout of Anita Carty, and they put it on the Plinth and pleaded for her life. Now, how do you go about convincing the world that this woman is innocent? Well, one thing they could have done, well, we might have done under other circumstances, played a race card because Carty's black. But unfortunately for them, all the co-defendants were black as well. So that was out of the window. Sexism, not really. So they decided to blame the lawyer. And if you look at if you look online for reports from the Guardian, etc., you'll read that Linda Carty is the worst lawyer in America, if not the world. A guy named Jerry Groening, and it's all down to him that she's on death row. And they're all parroting this. They recruited a number of female celebrities to plead for her life, saying what terrible injustice this was, what horrible life you had, and how she had this useless lawyer. Well, if you actually, the Guardian Observer sent a journalist, David Rose, out there to actually interview Carty. Well, I went to the website of the Texas Court of Criminal Appeal, and all the facts are there. Again, as I'm sure you know, the Americans in criminal cases they release huge tranches of material, sometimes prematurely, but it's all the documents are in the public domain. It doesn't take long to find them. And far from being useful, I mean, one of the things they said about Guo, is that he had more clients on death row than any other lawyer in America, which happens to be true. But they missed the point that he's actually a court-appointed lawyer in Harris County, the death centre capital of the death centre capital, and he was getting people like serial killers to represent. One guy he defended was. Well, one guy represented was James Emery Pastor. If you look him up, he was an Elvis impersonator who. That was the least of his crimes. That was the least of his crimes. Absolutely outrageous. No, absolutely outrageous. And as Guarino said, he never actually defended these people. He represented them to ensure that they received a fair trial as the most odious of defendants is entitled under the American Constitution. I'm not sure they'll get the same thing under the English Constitution for terrible crimes. But there you go.
Songs.
Horrible songs. It's all there. And the Reprieve have been churning out this propaganda, not just about her, but other cases as well. And even what really got me was that Carty's case went to the US Supreme Court, who declined to hear it. And the New York Times Supreme Court correspondent, who has a law degree, I can't remember his name offhand, he just parroted Stafford Smith's propaganda about Carty having a terrible lawyer and a lawyer best known for losing capital cases. Ludicrous stuff. And it seems to be that any time one of these organisations, be it a so-called charity like Reprieve, or an ad hoc organisation, comes forward, makes noises about miscarriage of justice, could be anything else, could be child abuse, child sexual abuse, could be violence against women, it could be racial stuff, it could be poverty. Nobody challenges, although they make the most outrageous claims about often ordinary people, and nobody challenges them. And you can go to, it just takes a little bit of research to realise that they're talking bunk. I mean, the RSPCA is an organisation which has a great name, but if you look at some of the things they've done, very not very nice to people. And this is, I just want to make it clear that however odious the government, however odious certain political organisations are, there's a lot of people out there churning out their rubbish. Often they throw statistics around. You can do all sorts of things with statistics, but when they talk about individual cases, be it injustices or what somebody's meant to have done, or if you look behind the propaganda, you think, well, you know, if this is such an outrageous injustice, such a worthy cause, why aren't the courts doing something about it? Why isn't the government doing something about it?